King David, who once faced fierce battles, now lost before the cold. Not because the palace lacks blankets, but because this is the cold of age and loneliness. Facing this situation, the gods have come up with a solution: find a young girl to warm the king. This is not a romantic story, but a profound story that contains great meanings about the weakness of man before the flow of time. The story of King David not only reflects the psychology of an old king who is fighting with the losses of old age, but also a mirror to the soul of each of us. It evokes thinking about how people face the finite life, seek meaning in each moment and accept their limits. Let's explore David's deeper psychology and journey. A journey to leave profound lessons for all of us. Before continuing, please take some time to subscribe to our channel. By registering, you will never miss meaningful messages from God. Don't forget to share your feelings, we always listen to you. Stay to the end to fully feel the depth of this story and find the way David's story reflects the struggle and hope in our lives. As a king, David is always at the peak of power, but that power means loneliness. The peak is not a place for soft hearts, and David, with the resounding feats and famous reputation, seemingly never touching that weakness. However, after all, when old age struck, unnamed feelings began to creep into every moment, every breath. David was the king chosen by the Lord, but he was just a human being. And man could not escape the limit of loneliness and fading of time. That loneliness does not come from the shortage of people around, but the emptiness when all relationships bring a layer of clothes of benefits and politics. The gods always appear at the right time with beautiful words, but their gaze contains calculated. The family members, although calling him with respectful names, but no one really listened to the thoughts of a king who spent his whole life to protect and build the kingdom. The more he looked back at his life, the more David felt that time was the enemy he could not beat. The power of muscles, the sharpness of the mind, and the glory from the feats gradually becomes faint. The enthusiastic youth years are now only memories. In the afternoons he used to stand in front of the army, solemnly with the crown. Now giving way to the days of sitting quietly, the body trembled because the cold not only came from the weather but also from deep in the soul. And then, Abishag appeared. She is not a god, not a wife, not an ambitious figure or status in the court. She was merely a young, beautiful girl, bringing her pristine and warmness that David has no longer felt. The presence of Abishag does not give David a passionate love or an unexpected passion. Instead, she was a symbol of youth, of the vitality he lost. Every time she looked at her, David not only saw a girl, but also saw himself in the past years. When he was a shepherd boy standing among hills, dreaming about an unlimited future. But now, that future has become the present, and the present has become the. David looked at Abishag not to find a relationship, but to remember what was once himself. And it was in her silence that he found comfort. But that comfort is not a cure. It is like a mirror reflecting reality, a reality that David cannot avoid. He was not only an aging king, but also a man facing loss of health, loss of power, and even loss of a sense of usefulness. His courtiers may show respect, but their eyes are always on tomorrow, on the person who will succeed him. His family, instead of being united, was divided by power struggles. And David, who once stood in the midst of battle, now stands in the midst of other battles within his own soul. In those moments, Abishag was a quiet presence, a wordless reminder that whoever he was, whatever he did, he was still a human being with undeniable emotions. David's loneliness is not only a feeling of emptiness, but also a fear of being forgotten. He used to be the center of everyone's attention, but now he feels like a dying torch. The light fading, no longer bright enough to illuminate others. Abishag, with her youthfulness, was like a wind carrying memories of the days when he stood under the sun, strong and confident. But along with that memory, she also brings a heartbreaking reality. That time waits for no one, and even the greatest kings cannot overcome it. In his final days, David faced not only his physical weakness, but also a larger question: who was he without his throne? Is the legacy he left behind truly memorable, or will it be buried under the dust of history? The power struggles between his sons made him feel even more disoriented. David realizes that power, which he has spent his life pursuing and protecting, is now a source of chaos. In that context, Abishag is like a quiet space, a place where he can temporarily put aside his worries and find some peace. But that silence was also a reminder that he couldn't hide forever. What he had done, what he had not done, and what he left behind were all a part of him, a part that he had to face. Abishag is not the solution to what David is going through, but she is a part of that story. A part of helping him look at himself and accept the fact that no one, not even kings, can escape from human weakness. Her presence didn't change what he had been through, but it gave him a different perspective on himself. David, once a symbol of strength, now realizes that true strength lies not in denying weakness, but in accepting it. And in those final days of his life, when David looked at Abishag, he saw not just a young girl, but a part of himself. The part he had lost, the part he was rediscovering, and the part he had to leave behind. Her presence is a reminder that even though he is king, he is still only human, and humans always need connection, comfort, and acceptance. King David, who used to be a symbol of strength and courage, now faces the fact that his body is no longer the same. Physical weakness made him feel out of control. Not only for himself but also to his kingdom. He, who led the Israeli army through fierce battles, now struggled with his own steps. This not only shook personal pride, but also spread a deep insecurity in his soul. When looking into the mirror, David no longer saw the image of a powerful warrior, but an old man with tired eyes, trembling body, and a heart burdened by worries about the future. This feeling of loss of control does not stop physically. It spreads to his mind, causing David to start doubting his own value. The king, used to being the center of all eyes, now cannot avoid thinking that he has become a burden. His decisions, once considered the guideline of the kingdom, are now under supervision, even viewed with suspicion by those waiting for the opportunity to take the throne. In that context, the fear of being forgotten, considered as a symbol of the past with no value, has become a burden that David faces every day. Abishag's appearance is a reminder of the continuous flow of time, a reality that cannot be evaded. That youth never returns. Her youthfulness and vitality were like a reflective mirror, highlighting the gap between his current state and the memories of the days he stood at the peak of glory. David could not help but remember the days when he was a shepherd, strong and free, facing mountain breezes and wild animals without fear. But now, even facing a new day has become a challenge. The feeling of being pushed to the edge of life, of history, is like a haunting ghost every hour, every minute. He knew that his weakness was not only a personal matter, but it also carried the risk of destabilizing the entire kingdom. A weak king can easily become the target for those conspiring to seize power. And David understands that with each passing day, his existence becomes even more fragile. But in those insecure moments, Abishag's presence brings a small, fleeting, but deeply meaningful comfort. Abishag is not a solution to David's fears, but her presence reminds him that although time takes away his physical strength, it cannot erase the memories and stories he has created. Every time he looked at her, David not only saw a young woman, but also a part of himself. A part that was once strong, full of enthusiasm, and believed that nothing was impossible. But that memory is now no longer a driving force, but instead, a painful reminder. Time waits for no one, not even a king. And then, amid those chaotic thoughts, David could not help but wonder How could he, a king chosen by the Lord, find meaning in his last days? How could he face the fact that the weakness of the body is inevitable? That the throne he had protected with his whole life is now just a temporary symbol? Those questions swirled into his mind, making every day carry a quiet, yet undeniable pain. Abishag did not bring the answer, but she helped David find a silence in his soul. That silence could not eliminate fear, but it helped him face them in a different way. Not as a king gradually losing power, but as a person trying to accept the truth about himself. She is a nonverbal but powerful presence, like a small candlelight in the dark night, bringing a bit of warmth amid the cold of old age and the fear of being forgotten. David began to realize that true power does not lie in resisting time, but in accepting it. The presence of Abishag is not merely a form of physical care, but a reminder that weakness is not a sign of failure but a part of life. And in his final moments, David found in her presence a reason to believe that even though he was weak, he was still part of a bigger story. A story not only about power, but also about humanity and acceptance. The fear of old age, with all its complexity and pain, cannot be erased, but it can be seen in a different light. David, even as a king, is finally a human being. A person searching for meaning in his last days, learning to accept that his value is not in strength, but in what he has left in the hearts and minds of those around him. Abishag was not King David's wife or lover. According to the texts, their relationship was completely platonic. However, her presence gave him a feeling of care, attention, and comfort. A basic human need, especially as they face old age and death. In the last years of his life, King David was not only surrounded by physical pain but also by loneliness and silent fear in his soul. Wars are no longer with tangible enemies, but with inner emotions that are hard to name. With each passing day, David feels more clearly the invisible distance between him and the world around him. He is no longer the center of the universe around which everyone orbits. Abishag's presence, therefore, is not only a companion but also a bridge bridging that distance, helping him regain the simple emotions that he had forgotten during the long years of his life, power, and obligation. David is not looking for a romantic relationship in Abishag, because he understands that love in that way belongs to the past. But what he really longed for, hidden deep in the smoldering sadness, was the warmth of the spirit, a sincere connection, without self-interest, without calculation. Abishag doesn't need to say too much. Her mere presence, her silence, gave David a sense of peace that he could find nowhere else. She was like a small light, flickering but persistent, illuminating the darkest corners of his soul. David did not see in her a young woman with mere physical beauty, but a symbol of youth, of purity, and of the days he had known before the burden of the throne and responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. Abishag, in his simplicity and gentleness, reminded David of the part he had lost. The part he once knew how to love. Knew how to listen to the little things without having to analyze or place them in a political or strategic context. Long days in the palace, where every word carried layers of intent, made David forget the meaning of sincerity. And now, every time Abishag took care of him, David felt like he was back in another time. A time when there was no throne, no burdens, only the vibrancy of youth and unhurried dreams. But the presence of Abishag is not just a medicine for the inner pain David is experiencing. She was also a gentle but strong reminder that, no matter who he was just a person with the most basic needs. He needs to be loved, needs to be noticed, and needs to feel that he is still valuable, even when his age and time have taken almost everything that has ever defined him. In the purity of the relationship with Abishag, David realized that the real power was not in power or victory, but in the ability to accept his weakness and seek consolation from things small but meaningful. Abishag is like a person who keeps the time. A person connecting David to reality. While the others around him saw a king who was gradually fading, she saw a person in need of care. She did not ask questions, did not ask, and did not find a way to change anything. Her presence is an affirmation that even small and unimportant moments can bring strength and vividness. For David, the presence of Abishag is not a sign of failure, but a proof that he is still a part of life, can still find meaning and comfort even in these last days of life. Every moment Abishag was next to David was a small journey, leading him through the sadness of old age, through skepticism about his own values, and through fears that could not be named. She was not a miraculous remedy that could heal all wounds in his soul, but she was the light that helped him see the path he was going more clearly. David began to learn how to accept that no one could live on the peak. That touching the weakness and learning how to love himself in that weakness was an integral part of life. The presence of Abishag does not reduce the pain or loneliness that David faces, but it brings a small hope, a reason for him to believe that weakness is not a shame to conceal. David, in his final days, no longer sought heroic victories or recognition from the outside world. Instead, he sought peace in his soul, searching for meaning in the most simple moments. Abishag, with her silence, became a symbol of what he had missed on his life's long journey. The small joys, the moments of genuine connection, and even simple comfort. Simple but precious. In David's eyes, Abishag is not just a young woman but a part of him. A part he once owned, lost, and is now trying to find again. She was the last pulse of vitality in his life. A reminder that no matter how cruel time is, people can still find meaning in the smallest and simplest things. At the end of his life, King David's psychology was also dominated by the question of the legacy he left behind. He feared that the kingdom would fall into the hands of unworthy people. This is not only the worry of a king but also the obsession of a father. A leader who has devoted his whole life to building and protecting a kingdom from its difficult beginnings. David not only saw the throne as a symbol of power but also as the greatest achievement he had created. A place of pride and responsibility. However, with the weakening of his body and mind, he increasingly felt the fragility of all he had worked so hard to build. The conflict between Adonijah and Solomon over the throne only increased that worry. Power struggles within the family, which were not unusual in dynasties, now became a huge mental burden on David's shoulders. Not only did he worry about the future of the kingdom, but he also felt deeply disappointed by the division within his own family. The image of his sons vying for power, instead of cooperating to protect and maintain the legacy he had created, made David feel betrayed by his own flesh and blood. This not only made him tired but also made him feel lonely and lost in his own palace. During these turbulent times, Abishag became a peaceful refuge, allowing David to escape political considerations for a while. She does not bring advice, does not try to solve complex problems, but simply is present, a wordless presence that brings a great sense of comfort. David, in Abishag's presence, finds a moment of stillness amid the storms of his soul. She does not represent judgment or pressure, but gentleness and sincerity. David couldn't stop thinking about what would happen after he was gone. He knew clearly that the throne was not just an inanimate object but a symbol of unity, strength, and loyalty. But who is worthy to preserve and continue those values? This question became an obsessive loop in his mind, making him unable to rest assured for even a moment. And in those moments, Abishag's presence was like an invisible hand soothing his soul, helping him temporarily escape from troubled thoughts and focus on what was more important: the nature of existence and his own values. The chaos in the royal palace not only reflects the instability of a dynasty, but also highlights David's inner struggle. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at what he had created but unsure of its sustainability. Meanwhile, Abishag, with her gentleness and sincere concern, is not only a caregiver but also a symbol of peace, a peace that David has been unable to find over the years, full of power and victory. Every time David looked at Abishag, he saw not just a young woman but also a part of the kingdom he had devoted his life to protecting. She represents life, youth, and hope, things that David gradually lost as the burden of the throne and responsibility. Her silence did not make him feel suffocated, but on the contrary, like a monochrome picture that helped him see more clearly what was most important in his life. In the context of power competitions, David realized that the real estate was not in the throne, but lying in the values he had sown in the hearts of people. The presence of Abishag helped him realize that no matter who the throne belongs to, it is important that what he left in the heart and mind of those who trusted and followed him. She did not say, but through every small action, she reminded David that power was not the final destination but a means to create positive changes. David began to understand that the struggle between his children was not only a battle for the throne, but also a lesson about kindness and patience. He understands that, instead of trying to control everything, what he needs to do is accept the truth that his time has come to an end. The presence of Abishag is a gentle reminder that, even in the last days of his life, he can still find meaning. Not in the big things but in the most simple moments. David's life was a symphony of victories and losses. But his true legacy lies not in those victories but in the way he faced his losses. And in Abishag's presence, he found part of the answer he had always sought. True legacy is not what we build but how we live and love in our short years of life. Abishag, through her silence and unprejudiced care, became a symbol of continuity, a reminder that legacy lies not in the throne but in human values. King David was not only a historical or religious figure, but also a symbol of people in every life, from the peak of glory to the last days. The story of him and Abishag is not merely a small detail in the Bible, but a delicate portrait of human psychology, where complex emotions are reflected in a vivid and close way, making the listener can feel himself in it. David, from an illustrious king, has once dominated and conquered, now facing the inevitable losses of life. The feeling of loss covered David's soul was like a ghost without leaving. It was the loss of health, what he once considered the foundation. David used to be a symbol of physical strength and consistency. A legendary warrior, a leader who never subdued before any enemy. But now, his body betrayed himself, becoming weak, trembling before the cold breeze of old age. It was also the loss of power, something he spent his whole life building and maintaining. As a king, David once controlled it all. But the time and division in the family made his throne shaken. Not only stopping at tangible losses, David also faced the loss of control over his own destiny. He was once the one who decided the fate of an entire nation. But now, the fights between his sons made him realize that no one, not even a king, can control everything. This helplessness makes him feel lonely and small before the constant flow of time. In this context, the presence of Abishag gives David a sense of hardness to describe in words. She is not only a caregiver, but also a symbol of interest and attention. What he desires but feels more and more far away. Having Abishag next to it is not a physical compliment, but a confirmation that he is still valuable, that he is still interested and remembered. In the eyes of Abishag, David not only saw the image of a young girl, but also saw herself in the young days. Strong, full of enthusiasm, and did not know the fatigue. But David also realized that the time could not be reversed. And the presence of Abishag was like a reminder that we all, no matter how strong or powerful, finally faced the finiteness of human life. The story of David and Abishag is not merely the story of old age, but a journey of acceptance. Accept that power, no matter how big, cannot resist the flow of time. Accepting that weakness is not failure, but an integral part of life. Abishag, with her silence and pure concern, becomes a factor in helping David reconsider himself. In the moments she was with him, David was no longer a king, carrying the burden of an entire nation but simply a person. A person looking for comfort and connection in his final days of life. She was not only the one who provided physical care, but also the one who helped David accept his limitations. David, through his relationship with Abishag, understood that a person's value does not lie in great victories or achievements, but in how we face life's challenges and losses. Having Abishag by his side helped him realize that acceptance is not a surrender, but a way to find inner peace. That's how he learned to let go of unnecessary burdens and focus on truly meaningful things. Ultimately, the story of David is not just the story of an old king facing old age, but also the story of all of us humans facing our own finitude. In Abishag's light, David finds a small but enduring ray of hope. A ray of light that helps him understand that even though life is full of losses and challenges, there is always meaning in living and loving. And that is the greatest legacy he left behind. A lesson about acceptance, about care, and about the true value of life. The story of King David and Abishag is not just a historical piece. It is also a profound lesson about life, acceptance and kindness. It reminds us that, whether reaching the peak of power or glory, people still yearn for warmth, understanding, and feeling of love. King David's journey in the last years of life. As an invitation, please cherish the simple moments. Learn to accept your limitations, and finding meaning in even the smallest things. May God bless us so that we can follow a good example and learn valuable lessons through the life of King David. Let us never stop learning, never stop loving, and constantly believe in His boundless love. Lord, please guide us every day, so that we know how to live to please God, and better yourself in your journey of faith. Always listen to God's word, to feel His presence in every moment of life. Don't forget to share this story, so that many people can learn valuable lessons. And please support the channel by following and spreading the word, so we can continue to deliver meaningful content. Help the community live better.